Before I introduce the next guest, I was just thinking, the interesting about this group of people tonight is it pretty accurately reflects the mood of the entire country on who's in favor of this war and who's against this war. Now, the next person I'd like to introduce you folks to has written a wonderful book called The Genius of Impeachment, How Our Founders Found the Cure for Royalism. He's a journalist, associate editor of The Nation magazine, Mr. John Nichols.
Stand the wall. Stand the wall. Stand the wall. Adrian Kinney and Matthew Howard, soldiers of this republic who wore its uniform with honor, who are now civilians and continue to act as honorable Americans, as patriots. Patriots who would suffer the indignity of interruption, abuse, and accusation. Could have run away this morning, could have stopped, but kept coming to talk to you people because they swore an oath. They defend the Constitution. They know that the Constitution of the United States requires that citizens be informed about what is being done in their name. These patriots have come to Brattleboro tonight to help you, to aid you in the most noble of all your duties, your citizenship. Please give them the honor that should be accorded patriots. When I hear these young people, these good and beautiful young people, tell their stories, I feel a measure of despair. It is not just the facts of the stories. It is the fact that President Bush seeks to order 21,500 more young people, as beautiful, as good, and as patriotic as these two, into the awful quagmire that is Iraq. And at the same time, he speaks casually of sending hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of young Americans into combat against the larger, more heavily armed, more broadly allied nation of Iran. I feel despair. I feel despair because in November of last year, the people of this country, responding as is appropriate for citizens, went to the polls and they elected a Congress to end this war. And yet, months later, they continue to debate non-binding resolutions which, by their very name, confirm their insignificance. And I feel a good measure of despair. And yet, on a Sunday night in March in Vermont, I come to a high school gymnasium with rows filled to the back and people standing and cheering. People as beautiful and good and as patriotic as these young folks, because they care so much about their republic. And I am duty-bound to say to you, courage, patriots. The republic is under assault. The Constitution itself has been attacked. But we are the descendants of revolutionaries who fought a war against a king named George. They said thus always to tyrants, and so I say to you tonight, my name is John Nichols, and I want to impeach the president. I want to impeach the president because before we went to war, when we speak of veterans tonight, Dick Cheney went to speak before the veterans of foreign wars in August of 2002 and spoke of the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, spoke of the looming nuclear threat posed by Iraq. President Bush himself, in a State of the Union address, intimated a looming nuclear threat, weapons of mass destruction, the potential for destruction of our nation and the world. They deceived the Congress and the American people in violation of the constitutional dictate of checks and balances and co-equal branches of government. The President and the Vice President have committed impeachable offenses. The President has authorized spying on the American people. And I hear folks talk about the FISA Act. Say, now that sounds like a good regulatory act, something you'd put down in the bottom footnote, a little bit of bureaucracy. I don't care about the FISA Act. I care about the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States that says that the President cannot spy on the American people. The President has committed an impeachable act. I want to impeach the President of the United States because of torture and extraordinary rendition. I know my friends speak of the Geneva Conventions, and I respect them as all Americans do and should. But I believe the President should be impeached because the Constitution of the United States bars cruel and unusual punishment, and torture and extraordinary rendition are cruel and unusual punishment. The President has committed an impeachable offense. And I hear talk of Joe Wilson and Valerie Plame. We hear talk of how the Vice President and his aides and the President consulted on how to respond to the problem of Joe Wilson telling the truth about the war. And some people say, well, we need the technicality of this. We need to figure out, was Valerie Plame's identity revealed and at what time? Actually, no, we don't. The third article of impeachment against Richard Nixon, approved by the House Judiciary Committee, was for the use of his office to punish, undermine, and harm critics of his administration. The President and Vice President have committed an impeachable offense. Now I know that we should all wait for Congress to act, right? Because they're so they've been since the start of this war so proactive. Well, I'll give you a model of a proactive congressman. Vermont used to send a guy named Matthew Lyons to Congress in 1798. When John Adams enacted the Alien and Sedition Acts in clear violation to the Constitution, Matthew Lyons went to jail rather than go along with the actions of a tyrannical president. Now that's a congressman. Matthew Lyons well understood what the founding of this country was all about. This country was founded by patriots, rebellious patriots, but they were very polite. They first petitioned their equivalent of a Congress, the British Parliament, for redress of their grievances. They petitioned again and again and again until finally, knowing that there would not be a response, they gathered in Philadelphia. And a farmer from Virginia, a relatively young man, wrote a document called the Declaration of Independence. Many of you have read its first line, when in the course of human events. Not all of you have read it to the end, where Mr. Jefferson reminds us, in every stage of our oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. When the revolution was done, the first thing that the Americans did was invite the French to depart. They thanked Lafayette and others for the assistance they had given in the liberation of their country from the British colonial occupiers. Marquis de Lafayette said, "I love this American experiment. I will return in 50 years to see what you have made of your country." 50 years later, Lafayette did return as a hero. He returned as a hero because he had left and allowed the American people to shape their nation. Now, what they shaped was a constitution, and the Constitution of these United States makes no mention of God, no mention of corporations, no mention of business arrangements, no mention of political parties or caucuses or primaries or conventions or a schedule for electing a president. But the Constitution makes 6 separate references to impeachment. The founders did not fear that we could figure out. We were ingenious people. We could figure out how to organize our businesses. We could figure out even how to choose our leaders. But they wanted that we should never forget that we have a right and a responsibility to remove our leaders and not to wait for the next election. Thomas Jefferson said we did not fight to create in our president a king for 4 years. Not to wait for the next election, but if a president has violated the Constitution, wait only till the next possible moment to remove him from office. Now their document that they framed was only as good as the people that they gave it to. Jefferson worried. He and Madison wrote back and forth. Jefferson did not attend the Constitutional Convention. Madison did. They wrote daily letters back and forth about the convention, what was going on. Jefferson expressed a fear in regard to the impeachment question, and that is that someday we might have a president who was corrupt, who was dishonest, who was perhaps in league with business partners and allies and family members seeking to enrich them, who might even be a fool. And Jefferson said his biggest fear was not that, it was that the Congress itself might also be corrupted and occupied by fools. And he was equally frightened that the final check and balance, the press, the media itself, might fail to check and balance an errant or corrupt president. And so he said, it is good that we have rested all power in the people. And to assure that this was never forgotten, he wrote Jefferson's Manual, a set of procedures for the operation of Congress, in which he said, if a member of the House of Representatives does not move an article of impeachment against a president who has done wrong or an official who has erred against the Constitution, then the states themselves may forward articles of impeachment to the Congress. Any state legislature may say to the Congress, you must impeach this president. Jefferson said, yes, we did create a near-perfect republic, but will they keep it? When he said they, he wasn't referring to Congress or the media. He was referring to you, the people of these United States. And I think, to be more specific, I suspect he was referring to the people of a small state, perhaps in a northern clime, near the Canadian border. A state small enough that it might have maintained the most fundamental of grassroots democratic traditions, where they might gather on a Tuesday in March at a town meeting where they would debate many issues, garbage fees perhaps, but also the issue of how we might remove the garbage from our government. Now, over the years of this republic, we've created a beautiful flag. It's on display here, and thank you very much for bringing it. I do appreciate that. We've created a beautiful flag, a flag that was led into battle against slavery in the Civil War, that was carried by Martin Luther King Jr. and his followers as they marched against the segregationists of the South in the 1960s. A noble and good flag with 50 stars. Each star stands for a state, and they are of equal size. Yes, California is bigger, and so is New York and Illinois. Frankly, most every place is bigger than Vermont. But on the flag, everybody's equal. Every state is equal. Every state's petition to the Congress to take up the issue of impeachment is equal. When the slaves fled the plantations of the Old South, fleeing the original sin of the American experiment, human bondage, many had not been taught to read, because people thought if they could read, they would inform themselves and free themselves. Many of them, most of them, not even knowing a way to go. Certainly they had no maps. They were told to follow the North Star. Follow the North Star. And they did, north, out of the South, toward the states that supported the Underground Railroad, states like Vermont. Now, when I look at that flag, if I figure the stars are arranged pretty much as the country might be, then the Vermont star is up there on the north side of the flag, up on the top. And I would suggest to you that when you go to that town meeting next Tuesday, and when you go and hear the resolution for impeachment raised, or if it hasn't been raised, when you raise it yourself, understand that there is a whole country out there despairing and wanting someone, someplace to stand up and say, no more. No more lies. No more spying. No more torture. No more extraordinary rendition. No more punishment of our critics. In Washington State, in Illinois, in California, in New Mexico, legislators have proposed bills to bring articles of impeachment from their states. When I am in Washington, congressmen take me aside and say, we want to act on this. We know our president needs to be held to account. I say, why don't you do it? And they say, oh, we're waiting for a signal from the people. We're waiting. Oh, they all say, you know that. They're politicians. They're waiting for a signal from the people. They're looking for a, whoa. They're looking for a North Star. And I will just tell you this. America is watching Vermont. The world is watching Vermont. This country's looking for a North Star. And I would just suggest to you that when you go to that town meeting, think a little bit about Tom Jefferson. Think a little bit about all those people in the history of this country, right up to Drew and Adrian, who have defended it and fought for it and struggled to make it be everything good that it can be. And Vermont, be our North Star. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have a wonderful privilege as a writer and a historian. I get to study our history of this country and learn a great deal and write some books. And last chapter of my book is on Vermont. In fact, it's titled, What Then from New Fame? I liked New Fame's answer last year. And so it's a privilege to write about these things, but sometimes it is a privilege to be in the presence of history. History itself. And I want to tell you that history has been made in your lifetime, major history, fundamental history, of the good, of the noble. In 2005, the American peace movement didn't know how to respond to this war. There was overwhelming opposition, and yet, despite the fact that there was overwhelming opposition, there wasn't a there. It hadn't congealed. There wasn't, should we do a petition? Should we make a phone call? What should we do? One woman decided to stop waiting for someone else to tell her what to do. She went to Texas and she pitched a tent beside a ditch, and that woman deigned to demand that the President of the United States would speak to her about why he led the country into an illegal and immoral war that had killed her son. Her action, her single courageous action, although she would always tell you there were so many others, but her courageous action inspired the peace movement. But it went way beyond that. It inspired people all over this planet. People in countries around this world utter her name with reverence. They do not hate all Americans. People around this world, and certainly a lot of us, love this woman. Please welcome Cindy Sheehan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful song, my sisters. I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm just going to go sign by sign back here. You know, Adrian and Matt served our country. My son served our country. My son died in the service of the country. You know who didn't serve the country? Dick Cheney and George Bush. Dick Cheney got 5 deferments during Vietnam. You know why? He had other priorities. You know, my son had other priorities. He wanted to get married. He wanted to have children. He wanted to be a permanent deacon in the Catholic Church. He wanted to be an elementary school teacher. You know what? He wanted to live. He didn't want to die at 24. And he realized when he joined the military that there's a chance of that. But when are we going to demand that our leaders only use our military to defend America and not to spread corporate colonialism all over the world? Now, there's a very nice man over there. He doesn't agree with us, but that's okay. Most people do. Some people don't. And he's nice. He really is. He's got a sign that says "One Nation Under God." I just want to tell you, all nations are under God. Every nation is under God. And my God said, "Thou shalt not kill." My God told Moses to come down from the mountain and bring the 10 Commandments. And one of them, the 5th one, said, "Thou shalt not kill." It doesn't say "thou shalt not kill" unless George Bush wants your oil. Then you can go ahead and kill people if George Bush wants your oil. It didn't say "thou shalt not kill." Thou shalt not kill unless George Bush wants to drive a pipeline through your country. It says "thou shalt not kill," period. The end. Period, the end. And then God came to earth as a man named Jesus. And Jesus was in the temple. And someone came up to Jesus and said, "Master, we have 10 commandments. Which one is the most important?" And Jesus said, "There are 2. Love God and love your neighbor." When Jesus said love your neighbor, he probably meant don't kill them. I wish this nation was under God. George Bush says God told him to invade Iraq. My God would never tell anybody to do such a thing. My God is appalled that George Bush has ordered and condones torture. My God is appalled that George Bush is lying and saying that he's spreading freedom and democracy to Iraq when they're taking away our freedoms here in America. All these people, if this was a rally with George Bush or Dick Cheney, Bloody George or Doomsday Dick, they would be 2 miles away in a free speech zone. They wouldn't be in here. And the reason I've been arrested 7 times is because when I am ordered to go to my free speech zone, I say, you know what? This is America. Every inch of this country is a free speech zone. And I say, you get out of my way because you're impeding freedom. When you get in my way, you're impeding freedom. So that's why I have a torn rotator cuff here. That's why I have a bad back, because they drag me out. They arrest me. They put me in jail for exercising my freedom of speech. I was arrested in the State of Union for wearing a t-shirt. I'm the mother of an American hero. And I was arrested for wearing a t-shirt at the State of the Union. That's despicable. My son died in the service of his country. That's despicable that any American. People tell me, you think you have the right to speak out because your son was killed in the war? I said, no, I have the right to speak out because of my birth certificate. And people say, well, if you have that right, soldiers gave you that right? No, the Constitution gave me that right. And soldiers and our leaders swear an oath to that Constitution. And George Bush has made a mockery of it. In fact, out of his own mouth, he called it a goddamn scrap of paper. Out of his own mouth. An old scrap of paper. And he said that FISA is an old law. It's back in the 70s. Well, you know what? So is the Bible. It was made way before FISA. He doesn't follow the Bible. He doesn't follow our Constitution.